It's a new dawn. It's a new day. It's a new life.
It's a new way to vacation. Welcome to the 4 parks of Universal Orlando Resort, including the all-new Universal Epic Universe. From the wizarding world of Harry Potter to Jurassic Park to spectacular themed hotels, we offer an entire week's worth of excitement. Vacations will never be the same. Visit universalorlando.com.
This is Let the Record Show, using common sense. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Welcome back to Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. Jesse is a vice chair of the New York State Republican Party and a county chair of the Suffolk Party. And joining us again is our good friend and colleague, Eric Levine, noted attorney, commentator, and essayist. Later in the show, we'll have Congressman John Faso come on as a guest. Now, gentlemen, the President of the United States, Joe Biden, in his swan song, spoke before the United Nations. And I have to tell you something. I don't know what was more troubling. The fact that he's still the President of the United States and he hasn't been removed pursuant to the 25th Amendment to the Constitution, because he's obviously totally incapable of making rational decisions. The rational decisions themselves, the fact that it highlights America's weakness, the weakness and failures of his foreign policy, which is when they keep saying they want change, but yet Kamala Harris will not tell you what changes she will make. She said, just trust me, trust me, trust me. Everything will be swell. The last time we had everything will be swell, hope and change, no specifics, we got Barack Obama, who sold out this country, sold out Western civilization, sold out Israel, has made the world a much more dangerous place. So my first question to each of you gentlemen is, if you listened to that speech or read about that speech, what gets you concerned? We'll start with Eric, then to Jesse.
Well, I think what gets me concerned is that the speech and the reality have nothing in common. The president was talking about America's role in the world and how well things are going, and how the American-led world order is everything's perfect, and that we're on the dawn of a new era of American leadership and world peace. The only problem is we are on the dawn of the end of the American-led world order and World War III, if we're not already in it. I mean, let's just recap some of the highlights, foreign policy highlights from the Biden administration. Of course, it all begins with the catastrophic surrender in Afghanistan and the death of 13 service members as a result of decisions made by the Biden-Harris administration. And the sign of weakness that has been projected from that moment forward to the world. You can draw a direct line from the catastrophic surrender in Afghanistan, where we betrayed our Afghan allies, we betrayed Afghan nationals that worked for the United States, left Americans behind, ineptly withdrew the military before getting civilians out, left billions of dollars of munitions for the Taliban to use and to give to the Chinese so they can get intelligence on American most modern weaponry. We gave up. Afghanistan is one of the few, if not the only country in the world that borders both China and Iran. They gave up Bagram Air Force Base, from which we had absolute freedom in the skies to spy on 2 of our biggest enemies, China and Iran. And then, of course, as I just said, you have a direct line from there to the invasion of Ukraine, because Putin saw this. If the United States will not defend its own interests, why would we believe for a minute that they'll defend Ukraine, which is not a member of NATO? So another huge success in the Biden administration, as the Russians were massing their troops around Ukraine, people were encouraging the president to impose sanctions at that time. But he held off. He didn't want to impose any sanctions unless and until Russia invaded. And then he had made the brilliant announcement that if there's a minor incursion into Ukraine, it would be okay. So in other words, not only would he not put sanctions on while the Russians were surrounding Ukraine, he invited them to invade Ukraine, and there'd be no consequence for it. And then, sure enough, Putin, who's listening, invades Ukraine. And what was President Biden's first reaction? His first response was to surrender. Remember, he offered Zelensky a ride. Zelensky is the one who said, I don't want a ride, I want bullets. Had Zelensky not stood and fought and steeled Biden's spine, Russia would own all of Ukraine today. Biden was prepared to surrender.
By the way, what's the significance of losing Ukraine?
Well, of course, once you lose Ukraine, then they're on the border of NATO. This is this is where the progressive this is where the isolationist right is also just missing the boat, because right now Russians are dying and Ukrainians are dying, but no Americans are dying, and the Ukrainians are fighting our enemy. If Russia takes over Ukraine, then they're on the board. Then they border Poland, the Baltics, a whole bunch of NATO nations. So
you have the revitalization of the empire,
correct?
Russian empire,
and so Putin is looking to reestablish the near abroad, as the Russians call it, the Soviet empire. And once he takes one foot into a NATO ally, then Article 5 requires the United States to come to their military aid. So while the Russians are dying, no Americans are dying, but if he takes Ukraine and crosses into a NATO country, Americans will die. And to the people who are concerned about the cost, the United States, 2 points. When we send money to Ukraine, we're not really sending checks to Ukraine. We're actually sending checks to Raytheon and Boeing to modernize American weapon systems, and we are sending the obsolete weapon systems to Ukraine to use against Russia. But even there, the Biden administration is always $1 short and a day late and slow walks munitions to the Ukrainians, because the strategy is, it's okay, we don't want the Ukrainians to lose, but neither do we want them to win. So Biden ties Ukraine's hand. So when Russians attack Ukraine from Russian territory, we give weapons to the Ukrainians. They're not allowed to attack Russia inside Russia. It's this, they're always on the defensive. And where else are we seeing that? We're now seeing that also in Israel.
And by the way, and what was lacking in Biden's speech yesterday with respect to the Middle East crisis?
There's one sentence on Iran. One sentence on Iran. So just as the catastrophic surrender in Afghanistan led to the direct attack on Ukraine, so does the appeasement of Iran lead to the direct attack on October 7th in Israel. Iran was broke. It had no money. It had no foreign currency after the end of the Trump administration. The Biden administration has been infusing billions and billions of dollars into the Iranian economy, save the Iranian economy, and they are the ones who have funded, the United States have funded the Hamas attack on October 7th. The United States has been funding the Iranian funding of Hezbollah. They use the money that we have given them because we are not enforcing sanctions. So when Joe Biden talks about all these sanctions they impose, sanctions are meaningless if you don't enforce them. Most of China's money, foreign currency, has now come either from the United States in terms of paying for hostages or just on freezing assets, but primarily because we are allowing Iran to illegally, in violation of American law and international law, to sell cheap oil to China. And then China takes this money and it funds its terrorist organizations in the Middle East, Hamas and Hezbollah, to name two. They fund the their terrorist proxies that attack directly American service members in Syria and Iraq. And there have been over 200 attacks since October 7th. We have not retaliated. This is the legacy. This is the legacy of the Biden administration in foreign policy. There's new dawn. Now, lo and behold, the Israelis are fighting their war. And every time they attempt to take the offensive, we all know in the United States, we're all sports fans, or most of us are sports fans. The concept of the best defense is a good offense. Don't let them take the field. You stay on the field. You stay on offense, so you're not on defense. You can't score unless you have the ball, all those concepts. The Biden administration's approach is you can play dodgeball, but you can't throw the ball back. So every time the Israelis were first trying to go into Gaza, don't retaliate. Okay, they're in Gaza. Now we're going to go into Khan Yunis. Don't go into Khan Yunis. Oh, no, okay, you're in Khan Yunis. That's all successful. Great, wonderful. But you can't go into Rafah. Oh, that's working out well for you? Oh, great. But now you got to withdraw. You got to leave. You can't stay in the Philadelphia corridor. Hezbollah's lobbing rockets at you. 80,000 citizens in your north have been displaced, the equivalent of 4 million Americans. Don't retaliate. What's the magic word for the Biden administration? De-escalation. De-escalation is just another way of saying appeasement. That leads to real escalation. Exactly. So as we keep trying to, quote unquote, de-escalate in Ukraine, de-escalate in Afghanistan, de-escalate in the Middle East, everything's exploding. Everything's exploding. It's a true escalation. The only ones who are de-escalating is the United States. Nobody fears us. Our allies can't rely on us. And now if I'm Taiwan or I'm the Philippines or I'm Japan, I'm really worried about what's going to happen with China. They are sitting and watching. They're waiting. They're biding their time. Xi's been very clear. He's going to take Taiwan one way or another. It's just a matter of when and how. So this is the world that Joe Biden believes is a success. The only way you can define this as a success is if you're, as George Carlin once said, if you set out to fail and you succeed, which have you done?
You succeed in being
being
a failure.
Right. And that's what we have here with the Biden administration. So when you listen to Joe Biden's speech, it is a complete disconnect between what he says and how the world and what the world is in reality.
Jesse.
I think just to take up, I mean, that was fantastic, Eric, and I don't know how much more I could add to that, but you're right. If you can describe the foreign policy of the Harris-Biden administration, it's setting out to fail and succeeding at it, because that's what you have just articulated on the world stage. I believe that all our allies are now very curious, very concerned about an American-led world, globally here. I mean, the definition, if you can look at the word appeasement in the dictionary, you're going to see Harris and Biden's administration, and right there on at the start of that. But if you take his speech, and there were several reviews from his speech, it was nothing more than, as you said, doubling down on the appeasement policy that has been handed down from Obama and his apology tour from 2009 on through Biden. And if this country is crazy enough to elect Kamala Harris, we'll continue into a third term of a fourth term for Obama. It seems like the president has adopted the woke UN terminology and proposals of using language like, ease the suffering of Gaza. Well, where's the concern for the millions of Israeli people who have been harmed as a result of this unprovoked terrorist attack that commenced on October 7th, continues on a daily basis, and now there's two fronts. Israel has had to attack, in my estimation, and I'm no global expert here, they're surrounded almost on the north and with the Gaza.
They have seven fronts. They have seven fronts. They have Gaza, Lebanon, the West Bank, Iran, Yemen, 7 fronts, and Iraq.
Yeah, exactly. He talks about the suffering. He didn't talk about the suffering of the Israeli people, or as you pointed out, the suffering of U.S. soldiers who've been attacked by Iran or Iran proxies, or that have been taking on Israel, or American resources in the area. Too many have been displaced are those who believe in Western society, a good Western democracy, republic type of idea. And then to speak, you mentioned about the one sentence. Someone mentioned the one sentence that you mentioned about Iran, trying to tell the world that Iran will never have a nuke.
They're almost there. They're almost there.
They have enough enriched uranium to make at least four or five nuclear weapons.
And it's not Eric, Judge Weinberg, or myself saying it, or any zealots on either side. It's the UN's Atomic Energy Agency that's saying it, that they're on their threshold of this. You pointed out about Afghanistan, and I know we're going to have a broader discussion about appeasement, and that is the Harris-Biden foreign policy. It's been appeasement. And that began on that fateful day when the Afghan pullout commenced. And it was pointed out, we took the soldiers out first and left the civilians. Huge mistake. But right now, all of our enemies have seen the disaster that our foreign policy is, the direction of our military is. If our armed forces are being attacked and there's no retaliation, why isn't that more of them are not going to be attacked? I'm scared for them that there's going to be more attacks on U.S. servicemen and women. At the very least, Israel, and we have said this from the time and again, Israel is fighting the war that we don't want to. Now, it's one thing to not want to fight that war, but if they're fighting that war for liberty, freedom, and our way of life, we should give them the resources and support, unwavering, full-throated, with full financing behind it, not putting limitations on that as we've seen. And we've seen that with the Biden and Harris administration from day one, from the Ukraine, where they can use some U.S. military apparatus and where they can't, in what form or what type of strategy. And they're doing the same thing, delaying it and putting caveats on it with Israel. It's a mistake. At the very least, during the Trump administration, like it or not, he placed maximum pressure on our adversaries, whether it be Iran, through multiple economic and foreign policy checks on China, on Russia. ISIS was eliminated. We had the Abraham Accords, and we supported Israel full-throatedly with our resources. This is not what's happening.
Well,
Kamala Harris and Joe Biden have removed America from a leadership position and as a superpower on the global stage. Sorry for going on.
No, that's fine. Let me point out two things in the last couple of minutes of this segment. Michael Goodwin, the Pulitzer Prize winning writer from the New York Post, who's often on Katz and Cosby with us, said the idea that there's not going to be a ceasefire, that there's no deal in sight between Hamas and Israel is very good for America and very good for Western civilization. Because the net is, if you allow Hamas to survive, gentlemen, then they will just regroup, rearm, rededicate themselves to the destruction of Israel. Now, does Israel...
It's worse than that. It's worse than that. Because in that region, it's either it's the strong horse who wins.
Right.
And if Israel does not destroy Hamas, if Hamas comes out of this as a political force,
then they win.
As a military force, they win.
And Iran wins. And Iran
wins because the Saudi Arabians will see that, and they'll see there's no reason to enter the Abraham Accords because they see Israel as a bulwark against the Iranians. And if the Israelis will not defend themselves to the death, they're not going to defend the Saudis against the Iranians.
My last comment before we break in this segment, and the point that Michael Goodwin makes and Jesse has made and Eric has made is very simple. If Israel allows Hamas to regroup and to take over leadership and control of Gaza again, Iran will have a base to attack and to destabilize not only Israel, but all our other partners in the Middle East. It's the first step in world domination by Islamic extremists in their gambit for domination. That's a very important factor. This is not just about Israel, ladies and gentlemen. This is about the survival of Western civilization. You lose Gaza, Hamas wins, Iran wins, part of the axis of evil. Western civilization goes, Europe will go, United States is next. This is Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, noted attorney, commentator, essayist Eric Levine. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. Please stay with us for more important and interesting conversation. We'll be right back.
Let the Record Show is on the air.
In golf, precision is everything, on and off the course. PGA of America chose advanced 5G solutions from T-Mobile for Business for smooth operations and seamless transactions. Together, we enhance ticketing and concessions for better fan experiences from gate to green. This is pro-level efficiency. This is PGA of America with T-Mobile for Business. Take your business further at T-Mobile.com/now.
Shopping is hard, right? But I found a better way. Stitch Fix online personal styling makes it easy. I just give my stylist my size, style, and budget preferences. I order boxes when I want and how I want. No subscription required. And he sends just for me pieces, plus outfit recommendations and styling tips. I keep what works and send back the rest. It's so easy. Make style easy. Get started today at StitchFix.com/Spotify. That's StitchFix.com/Spotify.
Morning decisions. A creamy mocha frappuccino drink? A sweet vanilla? Maybe a smooth caramel or that white chocolate mocha. Whichever you choose, delicious coffee awaits. Start your day with bottled Starbucks Frappuccino drinks. Pick up a bottle near you wherever you buy your groceries.
Parents of tweens, if you're familiar with far-off drop-offs...
Dad, stop, right here.
Or get DMs about what's for dinner...
You may be experiencing tween milestones. For your son or daughter, these can start at age 9. HPV vaccination, a type of cancer prevention against certain HPV-related cancers, can start then too.
For most, HPV clears on its own. But for those who don't clear the virus, it can cause certain cancers later in life.
Embrace this phase. Help protect them in the next.
Ask their doctor today about HPV vaccination. Brought to you by Merck.
This is Let the Record Show. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia.
We are back on Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, noted commentator, essayist, attorney Eric Levine. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. So, a former... What was Leon Panetta? Secretary of Defense? Secretary of Defense.
He was the head of the CIA.
Head of the CIA.
And the head of the CIA.
And
right.
also...
and Chief of Staff, wasn't he?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And one of the signatories, by the way, from that fraudulent document about the lab being all the earmarks of Russian disinformation,
laptop,
the Hunter, which Miranda Devine exposed as truly Hunter Biden's. And they repressed it, they censored it, and they lied about it, and they impacted the election 4 years ago.
It was by design.
By design.
Yeah.
It was a political gimmick by our current Secretary of State Blinken and other people to blindside and gaslight the American people of the Biden corruption, the influence peddling by the Biden family. But let's go to Panetta. So Panetta shamelessly starts warning about Israel's efforts with respect to the pages that were distributed by the Hezbollah folks to their own people, to their fellow terrorists. And he says this is very close, or this is an act of terrorism by the Israelis. Well, let me point out the following. Hezbollah has been hitting since October 8th, the day after the terror attack by Hamas, has been hitting Israel to try to put Israel on the defensive and have them intimidated into surrendering, let Hamas win their victory. Hezbollah was the one who declared war on Israel, unofficially, of course, but with thousands and thousands of rockets, lives lost, 80,000 to 100,000 people moved out of Israel. So, in fact, de facto, they have depopulated and deterritorized the state of Israel, an independent country. So when you say that these folks committed an act of war, and when you respond by a limited, so-called proportional response, and you kill the terrorists and innocent collateral damage, well, in every war there's innocent collateral damage. In fact, the United States took out a lot of people over the years, and people were killed. But what did the Israelis really do? They took out the savages, the Hezbollah, who attacked our Marine barracks during the Reagan administration, attacked our embassy during the Reagan administration, and killed over 300 people. The United States neither had the brains nor the guts to go in there and clean up Hezbollah when that was an act of war by Hezbollah. And what is Hezbollah? Nothing more than an Iranian proxy. So instead of congratulating Israel for doing a great job and trying to de-escalate the war by escalating, because you take out their infrastructure, their strategic commands, their manpower, their brains, their rockets, the launchers. By doing that, you're in fact de-escalating. So it makes me insane that a guy like Panetta would talk such nonsense, and this guy was at the top of our intelligence community and responsible for our defenses. What kind of lunacy was Panetta talking about, Eric?
Yeah, I'm actually quite surprised. I had not heard that. I'm quite surprised that Panetta would say that, because he's typically been a pretty rational guy, but that statement is particularly grotesque for a whole host of reasons. First, the Israelis have been criticized up and down for committing some sort of genocide in Gaza because innocents are dying. First, let's remember that when the United States was trying to retake Fallujah because Obama left Iraq too soon and ISIS filled the void, when we were trying to retake Fallujah, the ratio of civilians to terrorist deaths was roughly 3.5 to 1. And nobody was accusing the United States of engaging in genocide. They were fighting terrorists. The Israelis in Gaza, 40,000 dead, 20,000 Hamas terrorists. The ratio is 1 to 1. But the Israelis, of course, are accused of committing a genocide. Wholly unfair, wholly factual, just a blood libel. But now the Israelis come up with a way to kill just the terrorists. And that is now considered an act of terrorism. I mean, what does it say when the rules and the definitions are constantly changed for only one group of people? It's only changed for the Jews. It's only changed for the Israelis. I'll leave it to the listeners to decide whether or not that's anti-Semitism or just stupidity or both. But let's also remember now who Hezbollah is. Hezbollah is Iran. Iran established Hezbollah primarily for the purpose of taking over Lebanon, a state that was supposed to be a Christian state. It no longer is. It's now run by Hezbollah. And this group is responsible, Hezbollah is, for murdering 241 Marines during the Reagan administration, blowing up the embassy in Beirut. You're responsible, along with Iran, for the death and maiming of 1/3 of the American forces in Iraq and Afghanistan. And these are the savages that Leon Panetta is worrying about, that killing these people or blowing their testicles off, that's an act of terrorism? No, that's an act of genius. When you go after
mercy.
And mercy, yeah, because you're saving the Lebanese people.
Exactly.
The best way the Israelis have made it clear that their war is with Hezbollah, not the Lebanese. They've made it clear. Let's also remember another little piece of history. At the end of the last Israel-Lebanon war, Israel-Hezbollah war in 2006, UN Resolution 1701 required Hezbollah to withdraw north of the Litani River and that everything south of the Litani River be demilitarized, and that UNIFIL, the United Nations International Force in Lebanon, would police that zone to make sure it was demilitarized.
How did that work out?
Yeah, really well. So Hezbollah completely occupies the south. It has completely weaponized the south. UNIFIL has been a complete and utter failure. And the Israelis have made clear their goal here, at least right now, is not to destroy Hezbollah. It's not to destroy all their weapons. It's to force them north of the Litani, as the UN resolution, international law already requires. And why do they do that? Why is their goal? Why is that their goal? As we alluded to earlier, roughly 80,000 Israelis have been displaced from the north. That's roughly 4 million Americans. They can't go home. And the goal here is to make sure that Hezbollah could not have an October 7th-like attack in the north. And in fact, one of the bombing raids that the Israelis launched killed a group of 6 or 7 Hezbollah leaders that were planning an October 7th type of attack. So if Hezbollah were to just say, okay, we'll comply with international law and UN Resolution 1701 that we and the Iranians agreed to, we'll withdraw north of the Litani River
and stop sending
rockets into Israel, this would all end. This would all end. Israel is not the aggressor here. Israel is defending itself. We come back to this notion that when Jews die, everyone's sad and they wring their hands. But when Jews respond and stand up and defend themselves and retaliate so that they can survive as a nation, that's always the bridge too far. Israel, let's keep in mind what Israel is. Israel is a Zionist state. I am a Zionist. And what is Zionism? Zionism is the belief that the Jews, like any other nation on earth, are entitled to their own state. And that's what Israel is, their own state. It is not an homage to the Holocaust, a remembrance of, it's not about death. It's about life. It's about the life of the Jews and the future of the Jews. And Zionism believes that that the future and destiny of the Jews should be in the hands of the Jews. And that's what Israel is. Israel exists to control the destiny of the Jewish people. And there is no future for the Jewish people if they're constantly on defense and death by a million cuts. These terrorists, led by the Iranians, and that's really the core of it all. Until we deal with the regime in Iran, this will continue. But for now, these terrorists must be stopped, and the Israelis have every right under international law and the right to self-defense to destroy these people. And they are doing it within the confines of international law. I defy anyone to tell me that when we were bombing Dresden during the Second World War, as we were marching into Berlin and civilians were dying, or when we were dropping the bomb Hiroshima, are you saying we're applying the same standard to the Israelis as we did to the Allies? There's no way that that's the case. And we always have to ask ourselves, why are we constantly applying different standard to the Israelis than we apply to any other nation on earth.
Jesse.
The whole concept of, I'm a big, spy thriller, techno thriller fan, and I read that religiously to relax. The whole concept, implementation of the beeper bombs by the Mossad was amazing. And it comes right out of the pages of the spy novels of like Jason Bourne and Tom Clancy. And what we were discussing is that how could you be more targeted in identifying and eliminating true terrorists while protecting civilians than the use of this incredible tool? I give the Mossad and those who orchestrated it and developed it kudos for that, because they saved civilian lives, people who should not have been hurt. They took those steps painstakingly to do that. And for an individual like Panetta, and this goes back, we see them all the time, members of the Clinton administration, members of the Obama administration, members of the Harris administration, the Biden administration, they want to weaken the responses of allies like Israel and also U.S. responses. They don't want us to fight a fight on equal ground. This is what part of the problem is in the DOD right now, the Department of Defense, the U.S. Secretary's Office of State office, and in the White House, is this type of mentality. What was done was proper. What was done was accurate. What was done was effective. And it's in accordance what needs to be done. I give great kudos and great accolades to Prime Minister Netanyahu and his war cabinet for undertaking this fight, because they're taking a fight against these proxies of Iran when we should be, and we're not.
And the question becomes, for the last couple of minutes of this segment, what happens next? Now, if Hezbollah is smart and cares about saving Lebanon and its role in Lebanon and the Lebanese people, it will back off. It will get the message and back off. If it's foolish, Iran has no problem sacrificing Hezbollah the way they sacrifice Hamas, and I have no problem sacrificing the Lebanese people the way they sacrifice the people, the Palestinians. So the foolishness of the Palestinians, the foolishness of the Lebanese to allow these terrorist organizations to destroy civilized life is amazing. It has to be stopped. Now, if they're smart, they'll take the brushback pitch and say, enough, they'll stop the bombing, and they'll move, as Eric has pointed out, they'll move back past the boundaries that were established by the UN Resolution 1701. That's what they should be doing. It's not Israel's goal to wipe out.
They can't.
They can't.
They back themselves into a corner. Right. They can't, and they won't.
Right.
So that's why. So unfortunately, there's going to be a land incursion. There's going to be a land invasion by the Israelis. They're going to have no choice.
Well, it's heartbreaking, and the question is Harris going to be the leader of the free world and Western civilization, or is she going to be as stupid and as gutless as Obama and Biden have been? And the bets are perfectly clear based on her vapid responses, her lack of understanding, her lack of schooling, that she will be an even weaker Joe Biden than Joe Biden, which is a horrific thought. The idea that she will be the so-called leader of the free world when she has no idea what has to be done, neither the brains, nor the will, nor the backbone to do the right thing. We are definitely going to be in a major worldwide war because of that failure of leadership. And so people who think she's the greatest thing since sliced bread, she's also wonderful, and she giggles and she laughs, and she's just swell. I submit to you, the next 4 years in the Harris administration will be one of the worst years in American history. This is Let the Record Show. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, noted commentator, essayist, and attorney Eric Levine. Please stay with us. We're looking forward to having Congressman John Faso on in a few moments. when we come back, because there is one of the most dishonest, disheartening campaigns led by the Democratic Party in New York State and sanctified by the left-wing legislature and a weak judiciary, which is allowing them to get away with it. There's a vote in November which has to be stopped, and Congressman Faso will discuss it with us in a few moments. Please hold on. Stay with us.
This is Let the Record Show.
We off? 30 seconds of carefree bliss.
Oof, like wind in your hair carefree.
Oh, like using Clorox Disinfecting All-Purpose Cleaner in the home carefree.
Yes.
Like dog slobbing on the coffee table and cleaning it with Clorox Carefree.
He's on a roll now.
Spit toothpaste on the faucet.
You got it. You got it.
Peanut butter on the light switch.
Oh, spritz, spritz.
Spritz, spritz. Clorox, man. Clean feels good.
Okay, we're back.
Use as directed.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. Not everyone is careful with your personal information, which might explain why there's a victim of identity theft every 5 seconds in the U.S. Fortunately, there's LifeLock. LifeLock monitors hundreds of millions of data points a second for threats to your identity. If your identity is stolen, a U.S.-based restoration specialist will fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Save up to 40% your first year by visiting LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
Fellas, you know Degree Cool Rush deodorant, right? Well, last year they changed the formula, and guys were mad about it. One dude even started a petition. So guess what? Degree heard us, admitted they messed up, and brought the original Cool Rush scent back exactly how it was. And it's in Walmart, Target, and other stores now for under $4. So grab some and remember why its cool, crisp, and fresh scent made it the #1 men's antiperspirant for the last decade. Degree Cool Rush is back, and it smells like victory for all of us.
I love ravioli.
Ho tanta fame.
Since when do you speak Italian?
Since we partnered with SAP Concur, their integrated travel and expense platform and breakthrough solutions with AI gave me time back to dive into our financial future. We expand into Europe in 2027, so I'm getting ready.
Well, you can predict the future?
I can predict you'll like that message.
What message? Ooh, hey, we all got bonuses.
You can save for college now.
I don't have kids.
You don't say.
SAP Concur helps your business move forward faster. Learn more at concur.com.
This is Let the Record Show. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia.
We are back on Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, noted commentator, essayist and attorney Eric Levine. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg, and joining us now is one of my favorite public policy analysts, great lawyer, great statesman, Congressman John Faso. John was a member of the U.S. Congress, member of the New York State Assembly. John, I'll tell you what troubles me. There's a proposal. It's called Proposition 1. It was put on the ballot. It never should have been put on the ballot. It was finessed by the Democratic Party to create an issue, a so-called abortion issue. It's called the Equal Rights Amendment, which is total consumer fraud. And there are real dangers with this if this is passed. This must be stopped, in my humble opinion. Would you please tell our listeners what this is all about?
Well, Judge, great to be with you and Eric and Jesse and your audience today. Yes, Proposition 1 is a true Trojan horse. The legislature and the majority Democrats in the legislature present this to the people this November. It's on your ballot as an equal rights amendment necessary to protect the right to abortion in New York State. Now, regardless of what your position is about the topic of abortion, we all recognize the New York State legislature legalized abortion in 1970. It is not under any threat of repeal or change. And in fact, this so-called Equal Rights Amendment, the word abortion doesn't even appear in the amendment itself. And it does, however, create new categories of protected classes of people in New York State. And here's the danger. The danger is that this will put at risk the viability of women and girls sports. It will seriously compromise parental authority over healthcare decisions for their minor children. it'll create new rights for illegal immigrants and non-citizens in New York State, because one of the features of this amendment, there can be no quote-unquote discrimination based upon national origin. And it also has just an absolutely unbelievable provision in it, which would say that programs to reverse discrimination programs to address prior discrimination would now be legal under New York State's Constitution. Now, most people, I'm sad to say, don't even know this is on the ballot. They don't know it's coming. They don't know that this is a massive Trojan horse that is awaiting them on Election Day. I urge everyone, if you don't remember anything else that we say here today, make sure before you finish voting, you turn your ballot over and you vote no on Proposition 1. And Judge, we can go into any of the details about this: parental rights, national origin.
That's fine. But I just want to point out to our audience the significance of making this as part of the Constitution is that it's almost impossible to change it once it's in the Constitution. That's number one. And number two, I tell you, as a former state Supreme Court justice, this will go for interpretation purposes to the bench. A New York Court of Appeals bench, by the way, ultimately, which is controlled by the left wing of the Democratic Party through the legislature. So you're not even get an honest read on the constitutionality. They'll interpret this to broaden the rights because it's consistent with what the left wing legislators want. What's your thought on that, John?
You're absolutely correct. The language that's contained in this amendment is filled with vague and undefined terms. Now, let me just give you an example. And this goes to the question of parental rights over the health care decisions for their minor children. This would create a new constitutional right to non-discrimination based on gender identity and gender expression. And we all know the transgender movement has been very, very vocal in recent years, etc. Many, many young people, especially teenage girls and middle school age girls, have been convinced through social media that, well, maybe I'm really not a girl, maybe I really want to be a boy. Okay, leave all the questions of gender dysphoria and the psychological issues, leave that aside. This amendment creates a new right to non-discrimination based on gender identity and gender expression. And there's no distinction for minors. It applies to all persons. So what will happen, Judge, if this is enacted? A 14 or 15-year-old will go get an advocacy organization like the ACLU or the Human Rights Campaign to represent her or him, and they will go into a court and say, I want to have puberty blockers, or I want to have so-called gender-affirming care, or I want even gender surgery, and my parents won't let me. Because this amendment applies to all persons, as a constitutional right, it will supersede any statutory rights in law that are given to parents to control the health care decisions for their minor children. That's exactly what you were saying, Judge, in terms of how courts will interpret this. And to look at the question of women's and girls' sports. We know that this is a matter of some controversy where biological males are asserting their right to participate on female sports teams in high school, in college, and elsewhere. And once you create a constitutional right to non-discrimination based on gender identity and gender expression, you can guarantee when this matter winds up in court and the plaintiff says, I'm a transgender person, I'm a biological male, but I consider myself a female. That's my gender identity. That's my gender expression. They are discriminating against me based upon my transgender status and not allowing me to participate on this girls' or women's sports team, and that violates the New York State Constitution. This is precisely how this amendment will be interpreted by many courts and many judges in this state, and that's exactly what the left wing, the progressives, so-called, in the Democratic Party are seeking. That's what they're doing. In fact, you remember Kamala Harris actually in 2019, when she was first running for president, she answered a questionnaire from the ACLU in California, and she said she supported providing transgender surgeries to inmates, including illegal migrant inmates in California prisons. That's how far an extreme left she is on this topic. But this has now become mainstream among the Democratic Party leadership in our state and across the country. It is not mainstream, Judge, among average rank-and-file Democrats. They're not aware of their party doing this for the most part. But in actual point of fact, when people in New York State, when they're polled and they're told what the ramifications of this amendment are, they will vote against it. But the question is, and that's why I'm so appreciative of being on the air with you today, because we are giving vital information to your listeners and to the people in New York State as to what the real intent of Proposition 1 is. This is what the sponsors of that amendment intend. And in fact, some say, well, you really are exaggerating. You're raising questions that aren't, that can't possibly be true. Well, just last year, the New York State Department of Education issued a guidance and advisory to all the school districts, 700 school districts in New York State. And what would that guidance said? It said, if a child decides they want to change their gender and be called a different name of a different gender and be treated as the opposite sex in their school, and they don't want you to tell the parents, guess what? The New York State Education Department orders the school districts, they may not tell the parents. And it's outrageous that they would be diminishing and circumventing parental rights.
And make it part of the New York State Constitution. Eric.
But if they wanted an aspirin for their kid, they need the parental approval.
That's right. My wife was a school nurse for 22 years at our local high school, and she'll tell you she couldn't give a Tylenol to a student unless the parent knew and the parent approved and said this was okay. Always had to receive parental consent for any medical treatment or care, even as minor as giving a Tylenol to a child in school. Even that minor thing, you still, as the medical provider, you had to get parental permission. But we know what the advocates are going to do with this amendment if this new constitutional right is enacted.
So what is their response to the point when they you're saying that the reverse discrimination is legal if it's undoing past discrimination.
Yeah.
What is their response to the point that, well, that's unconstitutional, violates the Fifth and 14th Amendment?
They basically don't give any response. In fact, that part of the proposition, that part of the proposed constitutional amendment, Eric, has gotten very little attention. Professor Bill Jacobson, who's a law professor up at Cornell in Ithaca, New York, he has looked at this and he said, this is an outrageous proposal. So, for instance, consider this. The New York State legislature adopted a law, and they now have a reparations commission, which is considering the question of should we compensate African Americans for slavery. Now, slavery ended in New York State in 1825 or 1826, and obviously, thank you to Abraham Lincoln and the blood of our soldiers, it was ended in this country. And we have constitutional provisions, the 13th and 14th Amendment, that grant equal rights to everyone, and the 13th Amendment abolished slavery. The question of reparations, this is a big issue in California. It's going to be a big issue in New York. If adopted, this section of this amendment, which says that reverse discrimination programs could be acceptable to address past discrimination, that could be used to justify the payment of reparations by New York State. It could be used to, under state constitutional theory, leaving aside the federal and whether or not this would fly under federal law. You know the issues in New York City over the specialized high school, like Bronx High School of Science, Stuyvesant, etc. Those admissions are very, very tough, and they're admitted by a test. Many have argued in New York that, well, it's not fair that 50% of the admissions in these selective high schools are going to Asians, that we have to more balance it based on the racial composition of the city as a whole. Well, this amendment could be used to say, well, we need to have quotas for admissions to specialized high schools based upon and the authority that's given us in this new constitutional amendment. And, Eric, it's amazing that they put this thing on the ballot. The New York Democrats put this thing, and Governor Hochul put this on the ballot. They didn't have a single hearing. They didn't invite constitutional experts, legal scholars to come before the legislature and tell them, well, how could these terms be construed? What kind of conflict would this create with other longstanding existing laws like parental control over healthcare decisions for their minor children? They never did it. They rushed it through because they said, "Oh, we've got to have a response that we offer the people to the Dobbs decision on abortion." And as I said at the outset, the New York abortion law is not under any threat whatsoever. That would require an act of the legislature, and it's not going to happen. But they are waving the false flag that somehow this is going to protect abortion rights in New York State. And at the same time, they're sneaking through this Trojan horse of all of these other things that the vast majority of people in New York, Democrats included, would oppose if they knew it was out there.
Exactly right. Jesse.
John, first of all, I want to thank you, Republican Chairman Ed Cox, and Conservative Chairman Jerry Kassar, for leading this fight to really, truly educate the voters of this district, because as you called it, Prop 1 is nothing more than a Trojan horse. It's truly a toxic Trojan horse. A lot of these issues here, and I think the more, and us being on the ground, when we talk to voters, you're absolutely right. When you let them know that this proposition would continue to allow, it's protecting young ladies, it's protecting parental rights, it's protecting veterans, citizens of this country, seniors, because this constitutional, this if passed, this Proposition 1 will undermine parental rights, extends constitutional protections to illegal aliens if passed, and truly puts dangers in our society. I don't know any family that wants to see a biological man have free reign to walk into a girl's bathroom. This is what this Proposition 1 does. It allows biological men to use female locker rooms, restrooms, and other facilities. On parental consent, we talked about that ad nauseum, and it's true. I mean, the fact that they are taking the parental consent over minors is unbelievable. But as you've been seeing this too, how is the best for, common sense individuals, New Yorkers? And I will tell you, opposition to this Proposition 1 is universal across party lines. It's Democrats, it's Republicans, it's conservatives, it's moderates, it's independents, because it's not common sense. It seems that it's just the agenda of a fringe extreme group that is in control of Albany right now. But as you go forward, what kind of different ways is a way that we can educate the voters even further as we go through this process to keep boys out of girls' sports and keep boys out of girls' locker rooms?
Yes. Well, Jesse, thank you. And there is there's a ballot proposition committee that has been formed of citizens, and it's bipartisan, multi-partisan, if you will. It's called the Coalition to Protect Kids NY. And I encourage our listeners to go to their website, Coalition to Protect Kids NY, or go to the website of the New York State Republican Committee or the New York State Conservative Party Committee, and you can find more information about this. But the key, and I have to really emphasize this. Many people, when they go to vote, they'll vote for president and they'd leave, and they vote for president, maybe they vote for Congress, and then they leave. They don't vote for the candidates running for the state assembly or state assembly on the bottom of the ballot, and they forget to turn their ballot over to consider the propositions. And I can tell you, you will typically, and anyone that's been involved in politics for many years, as all of us have been, know that you'll have a drop-off of 20 to even 30% of the people that go into the polls will not vote on every position because they either don't know or they're not interested, they don't recognize the name, and And I'm encouraging everyone this year, and I'm an avid Republican, as you know, but I'm encouraging everyone this year, when you go into the ballot and you vote for president, don't skip anything else. Vote straight down that Republican line and make sure that we elect members of Congress and members of the state legislature, but flip the ballot over, because make sure that you don't forget to vote against Proposition 1 and tell your friends and relatives and neighbors about this. The word of mouth is going to be important. I'm hopeful that there'll be much more media coverage of this, but that's why I'm so grateful to you, Judge, for letting me come on your program today and talk about this important issue with your listeners.
Well, the reason
John,
go ahead. I'm sorry, Jesse.
John, the one thing I want to point out, you described that this amendment went through, was passed without hearings, was passed without any input from any of the experts in this group, except those Albany progressive Democrats. I will remind our listeners that there are a number of laws that have been passed like this, and we're dealing with them. Cashless bail is one of them. When they want to hide something, the Democrats do, they do it behind closed doors. They make sure that no one gets any input. And if they want, and in this case, they want to take your parental rights away. They want to let boys invade your girls' locker rooms and your restrooms, and they want the boys to compete in girls' sports. We need to say no to Prop 1.
Well, let me just say this. If this proposition, God help us, passes, you will not recognize New York State.
Well, there's a reason why New York leads the country in out-migration. This will only accelerate
This
that.
will be...
Put it into hyperdrive.
There's so many bad ideas that come from a progressive left. The progressive left, which is dominated by the Democratic Socialists, and they're not Democrat, they're Socialists, and the Working Families Party. They push this stuff through, and the rest of us have to suffer the consequences. And as Eric just correctly pointed out, there's a reason there's out-migration. The numbers, I think, was 880,000 in the last 4 or 5 years. There's reasons. And one of the top reasons is that people of common sense who want to have a high-quality life and want to have respect for traditional values are fleeing because they can't live under this tyranny of this radical minority. Congressman John Faso, I want to thank you very much for being on Let the Record Show. Jesse Garcia, we've had another great show. I thank you as always. Eric Levine, once again, we thank you for being here. We hope our listeners have recognized the importance of the issues that we've discussed today. We say God bless America and God bless your families, and we look forward to being with you again next week on Let the Record Show. This is Judge Richard Weinberg signing off today for Let the Record Show. Thank you.
This is Let the Record Show.